How can one small country teach us everything we need to know about exchange rates? This is part one of a 5-part series, The Israeli Story as a Perfect Laboratory for Understanding the World's Exchange Rate Regimes. In its 75-year history, Israel has experimented with nearly every regime humans have invented, from a rigid peg to the British pound, to the US dollar, to a basket of currencies. From crawling pegs to horizontal flotation bands to diagonal flotation bands, to the fully free market regime of today. Each regime was chosen to solve the problems of its time. Each regime, in turn, created its own problems. By the end of this series, you will understand every major exchange rate system in the modern world, not as theory, but as something a real economy actually lived through. Let's start with the basics. What is an exchange rate regime? Quite simply, it is the set of rules by which a country's currency is priced against other currencies. There are 3 big families: fixed regimes, intermediate regimes, and floating regimes. Within each family, there are many flavors, and the choice between them, between fixing and floating, is one of the most consequential macroeconomic decisions a government can make. It shapes inflation. It shapes growth. It shapes trade. It shapes investment. It even shapes politics. At one extreme, you have a fully fixed exchange rate. The central bank commits to a single value. 1 shekel equals so many cents. 1 pound equals so many dollars. The rate does not move. To defend this commitment, the central bank must be ready to buy and sell foreign currency on demand. The advantage: total predictability. Importers know what they will pay. Exporters know what they will receive. Foreign investors face no currency risk. The disadvantage: the central bank loses control of its own monetary policy. Every decision must defend the fixed rate first. At the other extreme, you have a fully free float. The exchange rate is determined entirely by the market, by the supply and demand for foreign currency. The central bank does not intervene. The advantage: the central bank has full freedom to pursue domestic goals. Inflation targeting, growth, employment. The disadvantage: the exchange rate can be extremely volatile. It can swing 20 or 30% in a year. Importers and exporters live with permanent uncertainty. In between these 2 extremes lies a vast middle ground. Crawling pegs, where the rate moves slowly along a predetermined path. Horizontal flotation bands, where the rate can move within a fixed range. Diagonal flotation bands, where the band itself moves over time. Managed floats, where the central bank intervenes occasionally but does not commit to any specific rate. Each of these intermediate regimes is an attempt to capture some of the predictability of fixed rates while preserving some of the policy flexibility of floats. Now, why does Israel matter for studying all of this? Because over 75 years, Israel cycled through almost every one of these regimes. In the early years, Israel pegged the shekel, or rather the lira, first to the British pound, reflecting its origins in the British Mandate. Later, after the establishment of the state, the peg shifted to the US dollar, reflecting the growing dominance of American influence in the global economy and the role of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. By the 1970s, the world entered a turbulent era. The Bretton Woods system collapsed in 1971. Oil prices quadrupled. Stagflation hit. Israel, like many countries, struggled to maintain its peg. Inflation soared. The central bank found itself constantly devaluing the currency, in what economists call induced devaluations. Devaluations forced by domestic price increases that made the fixed rate impossible to defend. This was the era of the so-called crawling peg, a system where the rate was allowed to slide gradually, in a controlled way, against the dollar. The crawling peg was supposed to provide some stability while accommodating ongoing inflation. In practice, it failed spectacularly. By 1984 and 1985, Israeli inflation reached 450%. The economy was on the brink of collapse. The shekel was being replaced by the dollar in everyday transactions. People were paying for groceries with dollar bills. This was hyperinflation, and it required a radical solution. That solution came in July 1985, the Economic Stabilization Plan, one of the cleanest stabilizations in modern monetary history. It used the exchange rate itself as the nominal anchor. fixing the shekel to the dollar at a known rate, then refusing to devalue. Inflation collapsed from 450% to 20% within a year, to single digits within 5 years. The exchange rate, once a symptom of the disease, became the medicine. But fixing the rate had a downside. Israeli inflation, even at single digits, was still higher than American inflation. This meant the real exchange rate, the rate adjusted for relative prices, was steadily appreciating. Israeli exports became less competitive. Tourism suffered. To handle this, the Bank of Israel introduced a horizontal flotation band in the early 90s, a corridor within which the rate could move, with the central bank intervening only at the edges. When the band proved too restrictive, they introduced an innovation, the diagonal flotation band. The band itself moved upward over time, automatically accommodating the persistent inflation differential with the rest of the world. This was a clever, mathematically elegant system related to the famous Krugman model of target zones. By 2005, the diagonal band had served its purpose. Israeli inflation had converged to international levels. The Bank of Israel formally abandoned the band system. From 2005 onward, the shekel has been a fully floating currency. The central bank no longer commits to any specific exchange rate. The rate is determined entirely by market forces, by supply and demand for foreign currency. But here is the modern twist. From 2008 onward, the Bank of Israel began intervening heavily in the foreign exchange market, not to defend a fixed rate, but to slow the appreciation of the shekel and protect Israeli exports, particularly the high-tech sector. They built up foreign currency reserves from $30 billion to over $220 billion. This is a kind of dirty float or managed float, where the regime is officially floating, but in practice the central bank shapes outcomes through massive intervention. We will return to this in part 5 of the series. What's remarkable about the Israeli story is not just that it covers every regime. It's that each transition was driven by a specific economic crisis or a specific policy goal. From peg to crawling peg, to horizontal band, to diagonal band, to free float, to managed intervention, each regime was the right answer to the problems of its time. And each regime, eventually, ran into limits that demanded change. Over the next 4 episodes of this series, we will walk through this evolution in detail. Part 2 covers the crawling peg era and the battle against stagflation in the 1970s and 80s. Part 3 is the dramatic story of the 1985 Stabilization plan that broke hyperinflation. Part 4 is the transition to flotation bands, the elegant Krugman-style diagonal band that bridged Israeli inflation with global stability. And Part 5 tells the modern story, the Bank of Israel's massive interventions since 2008, the rise of the $220 billion reserve, and what it tells us about exchange rate policy in the 21st century. If macroeconomic theory is the textbook, the Israeli story is the case study that brings it to life. By the end of this series, you will understand not just what exchange rate regimes are, but why countries choose them, how they fail, and what happens when they do. If you find this kind of macro storytelling useful, please share this video with someone who would enjoy understanding how exchange rates really work. And subscribe to Macroeconomics with Michael to follow the rest of the series.